All the mythological events of nature are symbolic expressions of the inner, unconscious drama of the soul. Have you ever had that strange feeling that life is trying to tell you something, again and again, but in a language you don't yet understand? You sense it in the repetition of your days, in the way the same faces return wearing new names, in how familiar disappointments echo through different stories. It's as if the universe keeps sending you letters, but you've forgotten how to read your own handwriting. Carl Jung believed that nothing in your life happens by accident. The psyche, he said, is always speaking, always arranging experiences, symbols, and people to mirror the state of your inner world. Yet most of us, lost in noise and hurry, keep answering with silence. Think about it. How many times have you called something bad luck, only to realize later that it redirected you toward a truer path? How often have you met someone who felt destined, not because of romance or timing, but because they carried a lesson your soul still needed to learn? Every encounter, every delay, every ache in your chest carries meaning. The unconscious paints through the events of your life, the same way an artist leaves traces of color across a canvas. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is random. When you start to recognize this, the texture of existence changes. You begin to see patterns instead of problems, metaphors instead of mistakes. Life stops being an endless sequence of chaos and starts to resemble a mirror in motion, one that reflects not your face, but your becoming. You realize that the outer world is not opposing you. It is conversing with you. It is alive, aware, and deeply intertwined with your own psyche. What you resist outside will continue to visit you until you listen within. What you bless will begin to transform. Jung once wrote that the psyche creates reality every day. That means your thoughts, your wounds, and your desires are not passive. They shape the field you walk through. The unconscious does not punish or reward. It seeks balance, wholeness, awareness. It presents symbols where the ego sees accidents, and transformation where the ego only sees loss. So, when you lose a job, when someone leaves, when you feel a door slam that you thought was meant to stay open, pause. Don't rush to label it as failure. Ask instead, what part of me is this event trying to awaken? The answer doesn't come from logic. It arrives in symbols, through dreams, synchronicities, sensations, and sudden clarity after a long silence. That's how the unconscious speaks. In images, not arguments. In rhythms, not reasons. This is invisible awakening. The moment you stop begging for life to make sense and begin to participate in its mystery. You start to read between the lines of your experiences. You notice how the same lessons circle back like seasons, each time asking for a deeper understanding. You see how even pain carries sacred instruction when you meet it with curiosity instead of fear. And then, almost imperceptibly, you begin to change. The same situations that once broke you now reveal their hidden light. You stop searching for control and start practicing connection with yourself, with the silence, with the intelligence that breathes through all things. Because the truth is, life is not happening to you. It's happening through you. Every moment is a message, every person a mirror, every challenge an initiation. And maybe, just maybe, what you call reality isn't the ultimate truth at all. Maybe it's simply the language the unconscious uses to become visible, to remind you that the world outside is only the soul trying to speak from within. Cliffhanger, what if everything you see is not life observing you, but your inner world calling you to finally awaken? Is almost equal to 4,005 characters, no spaces. Carl Jung devoted his entire life to proving that the human being doesn't merely live in the world. He creates it, both psychically and symbolically. To him, reality was not an external structure imposed upon us. It was a living mirror of our inner condition. That means every so-called event is more than circumstance. It's communication. Life, for Jung, was not a series of random incidents, but a dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious, between who we think we are and who we are meant to become. The anxiety that grips you in silence, the relationship that repeats the same emotional cycle, the failure that keeps returning at the moment you thought you were ready. None of these are accidents. They are expressions of meaning, coded in the language of symbols. Jung observed that the psyche behaves like an autonomous intelligence. When we repress what we don't want to see, it doesn't disappear. It reorganizes reality to force us to look. He once wrote that what you resist not only persists but grows in size, because the unconscious refuses to be silenced. It seeks completion. He didn't view the unconscious as a basement of hidden pain, but as a vast creative field, an unseen intelligence striving for wholeness. Within it lives everything you've denied, loved, forgotten, or never dared to become. It's the invisible architect that arranges coincidences, dreams, and encounters to pull you toward awareness. When you refuse to listen, it doesn't punish you. It repeats the lesson until you understand. That's why Jung compared the soul's movement to nature itself. Just as the body produces fever to heal infection, the psyche produces conflict to restore balance. The anxiety that seems to paralyze you might actually be the soul's immune response, a signal that you've drifted too far from your truth. The heartbreak that breaks you open is not cruelty. It's the cracking of the shell that your old self can no longer inhabit. The mistake you keep making isn't proof of failure. It's a symbol of the place within you still waiting to grow up, still longing to integrate what you abandoned long ago. Life, then, becomes a stage where this invisible drama unfolds. Each loss, each delay, each season of confusion is an initiation into a deeper dimension of yourself. The psyche, like an artist, paints its message across the events of your days. The challenge is not to fix the picture, but to learn to read it. Every person who enters your life holds a fragment of forgotten truth. Every ending hides a seed of renewal. And just as dreams use metaphor to speak the language of the soul, waking life does the same, through synchronicities, accidents, and emotional patterns that never seem to leave you alone. But here's where most of us stumble. We try to make sense of everything through reason alone. We analyze, justify, and explain away our experiences as if understanding could replace transformation. We forget that the psyche speaks in images, not logic. We medicate what's sacred, silence what's meaningful, and call it healing. Yet, what we truly need is not to control life, but to cooperate with its symbolism, to meet it halfway, to participate in its mystery. Because when you ignore the symbolic message of your own life, the unconscious doesn't disappear. It simply raises its voice. The coincidences become louder. The dreams become stranger. The patterns become unbearable until you finally stop running and start listening. Then, the same reality that once tormented you begins to guide you. So perhaps the question isn't, why does this keep happening to me? But what does life try to reveal through this? Because the psyche, wise and tireless, will do anything to bring you back to wholeness, even if it must use pain as its language. And what if the events that wound you the most aren't curses at all, but the unconscious trying, in its own mysterious way, to heal you? In Jung's vision, the outer world is not separate from us. It is a living mirror of the collective unconscious. He saw existence itself as a symbolic field where the invisible becomes visible through form, time, and circumstance. What you call reality is, in truth, the psyche projected outward, shaping the stage on which your inner story unfolds. As Jung wrote, all the mythological events of nature are symbolic expressions of the inner, unconscious drama of the soul. Every situation that moves you, whether through joy, fear, anger, or longing, carries an archetype within it, a primordial pattern of the psyche that takes shape in the material world to reveal what needs to be seen. That's why fear may disguise itself as control, love may distort itself into attachment, and freedom may appear as loss. The psyche dresses its truths in masks that the ego can confront. Through relationships, coincidences, and crises, the unconscious seeks to bring its images into light. The soul uses the forms of matter to represent what can't be spoken. It speaks through the symbolic, not the literal. When you're rejected, it might be the wounded child archetype asking to be acknowledged. When you find yourself lost in chaos, perhaps the hero within you is being summoned to rise. When you face betrayal, maybe it's a shadow of your own disowned instincts knocking on the door, demanding recognition. Every external event is an internal movement wearing a costume of circumstance. The more you resist this symbolic dialogue, the louder it becomes. Life doesn't stop repeating its lessons simply because you're tired of them. The unconscious is patient but relentless. It will reintroduce the same themes, new faces, same energy, until consciousness emerges. The purpose is not punishment, it's awakening. The psyche longs for wholeness, and symbols are the compass guiding you toward it. Dreams, emotional triggers, recurring patterns, All of these are messages from the self, the organizing center of the psyche that Jung described as the image of God within us. The self doesn't speak in words. It speaks through images, feelings, and events that mirror your inner evolution. When you ignore those signs, you drift away from balance, and the energy that should flow through awareness begins to stagnate below the surface. That's when symptoms appear: anxiety, depression, fatigue, conflict. They are not random malfunctions. They are the psyche's alarm bells. Jung compared them to warning lights on the dashboard of the soul. They don't cause a problem, they reveal it. Yet modern life teaches us to silence these signals with distraction, medication, or denial, instead of listening to what they're trying to communicate. And here lies the hidden danger. The more we try to control, suppress, or rationalize what arises, the more psychic energy we trap in the unconscious. And that energy does not stay quiet forever. Like pressure building inside a volcano, it will eventually find an outlet. It might burst through as an uncontrollable emotion, a destructive behavior, a breakdown, or even a series of external accidents that force us to confront what we've avoided. The unconscious has infinite creativity when it comes to being heard. Jung warned that what we repress within always finds a way to express itself without. If you bury your grief, it may return as anger. If you deny your vulnerability, it may project onto others as judgment. The outer world becomes a theater where the hidden actors of your soul perform the roles you refuse to play. In that sense, every conflict with life is a conversation with yourself, a mirror showing you the energy you've tried to forget. And so, life keeps whispering, then shouting, then shaking, until you finally turn inward and listen. Because behind every repeated pain lies a sacred instruction. Integrate what you've exiled, honor what you've denied, bring light to what's been left in shadow. Only then does the drama calm, because the message has been received. But what happens when someone refuses to listen for too long? When the pressure to repress becomes unbearable? When the symbols we ignore erupt with the force of everything we've tried to contain? And when that repressed energy finally breaks the silence, what happens to the person who isn't prepared to hear what the soul has been trying to say all along? When we deny the unconscious, we begin to live only on the surface, breathing but not truly alive. Our relationships become repetitions of the same unresolved story. Work becomes mechanical, stripped of meaning. Days blur into weeks, and weeks dissolve into years. It's not life anymore, it's maintenance. Jung called this the tragedy of modern man, a state of psychic starvation masked by activity. We chase goals, but lose direction. We speak, but rarely connect. We achieve, yet feel empty. It's the cost of a one-sided consciousness, a mind that thinks endlessly but has forgotten how to feel. This imbalance, Jung explained, is what he called the dissociation of psychic energy, a split between the ego and the self. The ego believes it's in control, rational, efficient, self-sufficient. But it's like a captain who has thrown away the compass, convinced he can navigate the ocean by will alone. The self, on the other hand, is the totality of who we are, both known and unknown, and will not allow itself to be ignored forever. When the conscious mind drifts too far from the depths, the unconscious intervenes. It speaks through symptoms, crises, and breakdowns, all designed to restore equilibrium. That's why the more we flee from ourselves, the more life corners us with events we cannot explain. Mysterious illnesses appear without cause. Fatigue becomes chronic. Apathy seeps into everything we once loved. There's a strange heaviness in the mornings, a dull ache where curiosity used to live. We call it burnout, depression, or midlife crisis. But underneath those names lies the same truth. The soul is trying to make contact. Jung wrote that the gods have become diseases, meaning that the sacred energies once honored through myth and ritual now manifest as psychological suffering because we've lost a language to engage them consciously. So the unconscious creates friction, tension, loss, not to destroy us, but to wake us. The parts of us we've exiled begin to return as pain. The inner child we silence cries through loneliness. The creative force we buried shows up as anxiety, demanding expression. Life becomes uncomfortable not because it's punishing you, but because it's rebalancing you. Every crisis, no matter how unbearable, carries within a movement toward healing. The psyche's purpose is not comfort, it's wholeness. Yet this process feels terrifying. When the carefully constructed world of logic and control starts to crumble, it seems as if everything is falling apart. But what's actually collapsing is the illusion of control itself. The deeper self begins to reclaim the steering wheel, guiding you toward authenticity. That's why so many people say they lost control right before they finally began to live differently. The panic, the confusion, the sleepless nights, all of them are signals that the old map no longer works because you've outgrown the territory it was drawn for. The body reacts too. What we don't express emotionally, it expresses physically. The chest tightens where unspoken truth lives. The stomach aches with the weight of swallowed feelings. The throat closes around everything we want to say, but didn't. The soul whispers first, through dreams, intuition, restlessness, and when unheard, it begins to shout to the body, through the events that break routine and force reflection. It's not cruelty, it's correction. We call this moment losing control, but in truth, it's the first step toward freedom. The ego may panic, but the self is finally awakening. Life, in its mysterious intelligence, begins to reorganize itself around truth. What's unsustainable starts to collapse. What's false begins to fade. What's real, painfully, beautifully, starts to rise. You are not breaking down. You are breaking open. The structures that once kept you safe are now too small for who you're becoming. And while it feels like chaos, this is the psyche's way of saying, you're ready for more. But Jung discovered that there's a way to walk through this collapse, and to emerge not shattered but reborn, seeing life through entirely new eyes. Jung called the true process of healing the transcendent function, the living bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. It's not an abstract idea. It's the invisible dialogue that begins the moment you stop running from yourself. Transformation doesn't start when life gets easier. It starts when you can sit with your contradictions long enough to hear what they're trying to tell you. Jung understood that our conflicts are not obstacles to overcome, but conversations between opposing truths. And healing begins when we allow those opposites to meet instead of forcing one to silence the other. The first stage is recognition. This is where awareness replaces avoidance. You begin to observe the signals of the soul, the dreams that repeat, the emotions that rise unexpectedly, the patterns that won't let go, without judgment or interpretation. You become a witness instead of a judge. Each feeling becomes information, each coincidence a message. Jung once said that the unconscious is not evil, it's only natural, meaning that even the emotions you fear have wisdom when you stop labeling them as wrong. Recognition is not about solving the problem, but acknowledging that it exists within you. The second stage is integration. Here, you turn toward what you spent years rejecting. The shadow, the fear, the anger, the need for control. You realize these aren't enemies, but exiled parts of the same whole. The goal is not to erase them, but to understand their language. The person who suppresses anger loses boundaries. The one who denies sadness loses depth. Every shadow holds a gift when met with consciousness. Jung saw the psyche as a self-regulating system. The dark compensates for the light, and the light redeems the dark. Only by embracing both do we begin to feel whole. The third stage is conscious action. It's where insight becomes embodiment. You no longer react from old wounds. You respond from awareness. This might mean pausing before sending that message, taking a breath instead of defending yourself, or choosing silence where your old self would explode. These small, sacred pauses are acts of individuation. They turn inner work into outer transformation. Jung believed that each time we respond differently, we shift the balance of the entire psyche. We move energy from the unconscious into creation. And finally, the fourth stage, legacy. The pain that once imprisoned you becomes the wisdom you now offer others. Healing stops being a personal project and becomes a contribution to collective evolution. Jung saw individuation not as isolation, but as participation in the world from a place of wholeness. When you understand your own depths, you naturally help others find theirs. The wound that once silenced you becomes a voice that guides someone else out of darkness. This fourfold path, recognition, integration, conscious action, legacy, is not linear. It spirals. You revisit each stage again and again, like seasons of the same inner year. Every return brings deeper understanding, greater humility, quieter strength. This is the essence of individuation. The sacred art of becoming who you truly are, not who the world told you to be. The soul's goal is not perfection, but authenticity. But Jung warned that this journey demands courage. Before integration, he wrote, the ego must confront the very forces it has always feared. The beginning of healing often feels like falling apart, because it's the collapse of everything false. You meet your own darkness, and it looks infinite. You face silence, and it feels like death. But in that void, something holy begins to stir. The transcendent function awakens, the bridge between what you were and what you are becoming. And this is where many turn back. They confuse the beginning of healing with the end of hope, mistaking the darkness of integration for failure instead of initiation. Yet if you endure, if you stay, breathe, and listen, you'll discover that the collapse is not destruction but creation. It's life reorganizing itself around truth. And that's where the miracle hides. In the moment when everything seems lost but your soul whispers, this is where we begin again. Jung saw the spiritual path as a tightrope stretch between heaven and the abyss, a journey that demands balance more than brilliance. To walk it is to live in tension, suspended between light and shadow, human and divine, knowing that one misstep in either direction leads to distortion. He warned that the road to consciousness is not a straight ascent toward enlightenment, but a spiral, one that can just as easily inflate the ego as it can dissolve it. True awakening, he said, is never about escaping the world, but learning to see it with new eyes. One of the first traps he described as ego inflation, the illusion of transcendence. It happens when a person mistakes the first taste of light for ultimate illumination. The ego, dazzled by newfound awareness, begins to identify with the divine instead of relating to it. Suddenly, I have awakened turns into I am special. But the moment you claim ownership of enlightenment, you lose it. Jung wrote that the experience of self is always a defeat for the ego, because real awakening humbles you. It makes you kneel before the vastness within, realizing how small you truly are in the face of the mystery that sustains you. Another common snare is isolation. After glimpsing the depths of the soul, many retreat from the ordinary world, believing that solitude is purity and society is distraction. Yet individuation, as Jung emphasized, is not a wall, but a bridge between the inner and the outer, the personal and the collective. The goal is not to disappear from life, but to re-enter it with awareness. The flower doesn't reject the soil that nourishes it. It grows through it. Likewise, consciousness finds its meaning not in withdrawal, but in participation. We are not meant to transcend our humanity. We are meant to inhabit it fully, with open eyes and an open heart. Then comes the savior complex, the impulse to wake up everyone else before consolidating your own awakening. It often masks unresolved insecurity, a hidden need to prove your worth through others' transformation. But the truth is, no one can carry another's destiny. You can inspire, support, and mirror truth, but you cannot walk another soul's path. Jung reminded us that the greatest service we can offer the world is to heal ourselves, because every act of integration within one person lessens the collective shadow of humanity. And finally, the most subtle trap of all, regression. As the unconscious begins to demand more honesty, more surrender, the ego grows tired of humility. The old patterns whisper, "It was easier before." And sometimes we listen. We slip back into familiar distractions, comfort, denial, anything to avoid the intensity of transformation. But regression is not failure. It's feedback. It shows where the psyche still resists balance, where faith still wavers. The path forward is not perfection, but persistence. Healing, as Jung often said, is a rhythm, expansion, contraction, integration, rest, like breathing. The secret of walking this path is not to cling to light or fear the dark, but to hold both with an anchor heart. Keep one foot in the sky and one hand on the earth. Let your soul expand, but let your humanity ground it. The awakened life is not a rejection of form. It's the sanctification of it. It's washing the dishes with reverence, forgiving when it's hard, loving when it's inconvenient, and remembering that every act, no matter how small, participates in the divine conversation of existence. The real awakening doesn't free you from life. It frees you into life. You no longer escape the world. You start to see it. You realize that the light you sought was never in the heavens, but hidden in the moments you overlooked. in laughter, in grief, in the silence between two heartbeats. Individuation at its core is a rediscovery of meaning in everything. And when that vision finally anchors itself within you, something extraordinary happens. You look back and see that nothing, absolutely nothing, was ever in vain. In the end, the process of individuation isn't a destination. It's a way of seeing. The outer world remains the same rain, the same silence, the same loss, but everything glows with new meaning. You realize that life was never happening against you. It was always you trying to return to yourself. The storms that once felt cruel become teachers. The delays that once enraged you reveal divine timing. Every coincidence, every ache, every shadowed moment was a soul whispering, "Remember me." When this awareness awakens, reality itself begins to shimmer. The familiar becomes sacred. You stop chasing miracles because you finally see them everywhere. In the breath that steadies after a long cry, in the smile of a stranger, in the way dawn quietly forgives a night. Jung often said that the goal of individuation was not perfection, but wholeness. And wholeness is what happens when you stop dividing your life into good and bad, right and wrong, and start seeing everything as essential to your becoming. The world doesn't change, but your relationship with it does. You no longer walk through life as a victim of circumstance, but as a participant in creation. The self, that divine center Jung described as a totality of who you are, begins to move through you with clarity. You act, speak, and choose not from fear, but from alignment. You understand that the unconscious is not your enemy. It's your guide, your mirror, your oldest companion. The very forces you once feared now become your greatest teachers. This is the quiet revolution of consciousness, when the observer and the observed recognize themselves as one. You see that there is no separation between the inner and the outer, between psyche and world. Life reflects your evolution as faithfully as a mirror reflects your face. When you honor your darkness, light expands. When you forgive your past, time itself seems to soften. When you love what once felt unlovable, creation responds. Because everything in existence is in conversation with a soul that sees. The rain that once symbolized loss now feels like cleansing. The silence that once frightened you becomes peace. Even pain carries beauty, because it no longer means punishment. It means transformation. You begin to understand that every experience was not meant to break you, but to break you open. Individuation is not about transcending humanity. It's about embodying divinity through it. It's the sacred meeting point between the eternal and the everyday, where washing a cup, holding a hand, or forgiving yourself becomes an act of worship. You finally see that nothing was wasted. Not the heartbreak, not the confusion, not the nights when you thought you wouldn't make it. Each moment was a thread in the tapestry of awakening. The unconscious, once feared and misunderstood, now stands revealed as the greatest artist of your existence. The force that shaped chaos into meaning, shadow into wisdom, and pain into depth. The self no longer hides behind symbols. It breathes through you. And so, the search ends, not because you found all the answers, but because you've learned to live the questions with faith. You stop running, you stop resisting, and you start seeing. Life, finally, is no longer a battlefield. It's a conversation. Life doesn't happen against you. It happens so that you may awaken. If this message touched something inside you, write in the comments, "I choose to see with the eyes of the soul." And continue your journey in the next video, where we'll explore how the unconscious keeps calling you, even when you try to silence it.